Well, Thomas, thank you so much for helping with my project. I know you're a doing your master's in aerospace engineering at Stanford,
Mhm.
and that
Yep,
you're part of the SSI group over there. Um, and uh, and according to your LinkedIn profile, you're going to SpaceX, going to be working on the Starship propulsion. So,
that's right.
um, what other things would you like to share with us about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of interesting because or I'm not very interesting in general, but I think one of the things that's a little bit different about my story is I was actually originally a political science major, and so when I was starting off college, I really believed I was studying Eastern European government, and I was studying the the future of some stuff like commons problems, and I ultimately switched majors to aerospace engineering and ended up, I'm hopefully going to be working on a system that might be the human landing system for NASA, maybe if the solicitation goes that way. And I think what got me switched over there was I I found through political science studying, first of all, that political science always just felt, everyone around me felt the same way, like it was a holding action, like we were just trying to hold the world together for another year or two. And for me, for my temperament, I felt like I couldn't handle that. And space was one of the few places where people were excited and people were saying that, hey, we're going somewhere and we're doing something, and there is hope and there is a plan and there is positive forwards action. And that was really meaningful to me. And I also kind of felt, the more I read about political science, that it was important for humans to expand um, to through the solar system, not for the reason that Elon Musk wants to. I think that the idea that we need a backup planet is silly. I think that if the Earth is ruined so badly that humans are all going to die, then Mars is still worse and will be much worse for a while. But because I felt that in the long run, a humanity that lived on a whole bunch of different planets all over the solar system would be one that would be more vibrant and interesting and exciting and have more different people living in different ways. And out of my political science education, I thought that was really worthwhile. So I'm a little bit uh, iconoclastic about this, and I like to argue with my friends about why we should go to space. But that's why I'm excited that humans are going out of the low Earth orbit again.
Yeah, and I also read your op opinion piece about not putting astronauts' pictures on Wheaties, or at least on cereal boxes. And um, a lot of times whenever I'm talking to people about us going back to the moon, um, some are like, "Wow, that's cool," but ultimately everybody asks why. What do we hope to accomplish from it? And putting the first woman on the moon, what that only justifies the very first step. Once that's done, then there's no that doesn't get you to take the next step, does it? Um,
Exactly.
and this idea of the moon being a stepping stone into the rest of the solar system only makes sense if you think it makes sense for humanity to go to the rest of the solar system. I mean, if developing space infrastructure is only useful to develop other space infrastructure, then
Hmm.
it becomes like a chicken and egg problem.
I think my read on this whole situation is that I think that currently the space industry is kind of a Ponzi scheme. The space industry is, I think, very unusual out of all of the industries in that almost everything in the space industry is self-justifying. You've probably heard this before, but John Logston's phrase that the whole thing is a self-leaking ice cream cone. I
No, I
think
hadn't heard that.
Yes, space historian John Logston said once that the space industry, correct me if I get the attribution wrong, but that's what I remember it being, that the space industry is a self-leaking ice cream cone, which is a pretty horrid image, but I think it's the point across that so much of it is like, well, we should have space industry, we should have like asteroid mining to get fuel in space so we can build more rockets that can launch more things to mine more asteroids. It's like one of those clicker games that you play where you just get the things so you can get more of the other things. And I think a lot of times is felt to me that people come up with justifications why we should go to space because it creates innovation or because it's the first woman on the moon and that's meaningful, as kind of a retroactive justification for why they want to go to space. And I've always been very fascinated with what is the actual reason why people want to go to space. And I think some people I've talked to do actually believe in the backup planet argument in terms of like human settlement in outer space. but I think that one's kind of silly personally. And I think Jeff Bezos's argument of we can have a lot more total number of people and a totally large number of people, and living in space means a overall larger number of geniuses or whatever. I think that's a very, I don't know, that one doesn't resonate with me very much at all either. I feel like if we wanted more people, we could just have more buildings and focus our life on Earth on having more people. Um, so I think for me, the answer for why we should do it abstractly is distance. I think it's really valuable for human populations to be separated from each other so that they can try different things without bothering each other almost. So that we can just like have, I think right now it's really hard for people to live in radically different ways because we all have to get together on Earth. We all have to, everything we do affects each other. And I think that's, right now on Earth, we need to learn how to do that. But I think in the long run, that will restrict the diversity of human societies and the diversity of different ways to live. So for me, that's why I want to go out there so we can separate people. I think in the short run, I think the space spin-offs argument is justified. Like I think it's good for the US to spend $20 billion a year on NASA because it generates a lot of jobs and produces innovation and invents technologies and things like that. But I think that ultimately this whole industry, everyone has come up with everyone has a reason why they actually want to go to space. And usually I don't think it's that. And everyone kind of like retroactively back justifies it as something else that gets down to taxpayer dollars that they can tell people when the people ask.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're probably right. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, if you want to create jobs, why not build irrigation system using manual
Mm-hmm.
labor? You could create way more
Exactly.
jobs like that. And then
Exactly.
the innovation side, I think that was true during the Apollo era when we had no clue what we were doing and we were just throwing everything against the wall like strings of spaghetti to see what would stick. But now that we actually know how to do it, it's like it's so expensive. We're afraid to try anything new. So it's like,
Not that innovative.
yeah, it's like we're completely against innovation because that innovation equals unknown, unknown equals risk. Risk means we can't have failure. So let's not
Mm-hmm.
do it. And we talk about commercial off-the-shelf technologies, which, we're just going to use what we already have to do what we've already done. It seems kind of pointless.
Mm-hmm. And then, if we wanted to have a backup planet, then we could, I mean, I think we could, if we wanted to have 1,000 human beings survive the nuclear war, we could just as easily dig them a bunker on Earth as opposed to a bunker on Mars. And then they could visit their families on weekends.
Or even better, underneath the ocean. I mean, you got all
Mm-hmm.
this radioactive shielding in the form of water above you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly. So I think, and I think if we wanted to spend money on basic research, I think the argument of, oh, we spend it on NASA and then we like discover things accidentally is lovely, but I feel like we could just give the National Science Foundation $20 billion a year and say, hey, go fund interesting basic research, and I think they could get just as much benefit out of it. So
yeah, maybe. I often worry about that too, though, because the whole research establishment, I think there's some real critical, kind of
that's fair.
thought stuff that's going on, but it all seems like a journal article production mill as opposed
That's fair.
to a
Yeah.
true inquiry into. I mean, it's like what you need is people who would invent it or who would discover it regardless if they got paid for it. It's like the moment it
Mm-hmm.
becomes like a job and you have an organization and structure around it, it becomes, like you said, a self-licking popsicle stick, and it's no
Mm-hmm.
longer about what it was about.
Yeah. So it's, I think, basically where I'm at on this one is I think these justifications of jobs and innovation research are just enough to be worth the money, but there's still an opportunity cost. So like, I think what we're buying with $24 billion of NASA, the jobs that we're buying, the innovation that we're buying are worth $24 billion. So it's not the end of the world that we're spending on this, but the opportunity cost, we could get a little bit more bang out of our buck spending it on not NASA. And so ultimately, we have to go and figure out how to value things like scientific discovery and fluffier things about the future of humanity in space. And I did in high school, long time ago, I did parliamentary debate, which is this high school debate thing, and it was very interesting because in debate, you could never. The way you would win debates is you always had to bring it back to like jobs or health or something like that. And so these debates, in space, whenever someone talked about something like scientific discovery or the future of humanity in space, you would just get crushed because the other one would be like, well, but yes, 100,000 jobs, and you can't beat that. And that's a real thing right now. And one thing I'm almost interested about as people think about this problem is how people think about impacts like that, impacts that are kind of fuzzy and hard to weigh against. Or if we're just going to have to justify, we just have to say, all of that's incidental, and as long as we can get enough jobs, then we can keep going.
Yeah, I mean, uh, what do you think about NASA's role instead of sort of owning the entire system, paying for results instead of paying for effort? It seems to me that you're starting to see that shift of like the commercial resupply, commercial crew,
Mm,
the commercial lunar payload services program, and now the human landing system, where NASA's saying, okay, we're going there. There's this pot of gold if you're able to achieve it, but we're going to leave you to your own devices to figure out how to get there. It
mm.
seems to me that's a way to take that 24 or I guess 22 billion that we're spending on NASA and get it joined with several billions others from the private industry, and also to kind of get these teams that are liberated to try to outdo each other and create that kind of competition and energy.
I think it is amazing. I think I'm, going to work for one of the people on one of those contracts. I think this is a huge innovation in NASA's ability to do things, and kind of like a philosophical innovation. And, going back to what you said about, risk tolerance and innovation, I think, if you go ahead and I read a lot about basically, SpaceX's Starship at its core is really doing the space shuttle again, but without having to go through all of the requirements that the space shuttle had to go through. And the space shuttle had to, be the Department of Defense's launcher and have 1,000 miles of cross range so that it could spy on the Soviets, and use all of the same contractors as Apollo so everyone could get paid, and have a cost structure that fit with like Congress's deadlines. And so we got a vehicle that wasn't very good and blew up and killed astronauts every so often. And I think, at its core, what SpaceX's Starship is it's the same thing. It's a booster and a top thing with wings that comes back. And a lot of the early shuttle reference designs from 1967 are very similar to Starship. Before they did the center thing and the side boosters, back when they had, some of the early shuttle designs had like two airplanes stacked on top of each other instead of an airplane on top of a booster, because SpaceX likes the return vertical booster thing a little better. But in a lot of ways, I think what's different about Starship, what's exciting and different about Starship is not that it's a philosophical change about how you do space exploration rather than any technical advancement. It's saying, here's what you could do if the only metric you were graded on is how efficiently do you deliver payload to orbit. And I think, that philosophical change has the potential to all the stuff that we always hoped NASA would do. I think, this is one of the big things that's been missing. That being said, one thing I'm a little worried, because I feel like a lot of these commercial contracts are success stories because of SpaceX in particular. I think SpaceX has been on a run of great luck and decent management, but I I don't know if this is something that I think there is definitely the possibility that NASA will come up with one of these contracts and no one will deliver on time, and the contract is going to start to get in trouble. Right now, we've been very lucky that SpaceX has managed to deliver on these contracts every time. And SpaceX has been one of the contractors in most of these efforts every time. So I'm hopeful things might get a little bit more unsteady. And I do think there is value, social value in NASA's work. One of the things that NASA does where they have work in every 50 state, I think that's actually like a socially valuable thing. And, this current setup right now, you get a lot of work in Hawthorne, California, and Boca Chica, Texas, and Cape Canaveral, Florida. And I'm hopeful that NASA can take the money that they save from this new form of contracting on the human landing system or on a rocket and spend it on doing empowering research teams to go work on something exciting and new, like getting a group of people to say, hey, let's go build a linear aerospike, and then put that research center in South Dakota, so that, because I think the more I read about it, the more I think one of the valuable things about NASA's jobs program, as it were, is almost more of just putting engineering jobs in places where people don't normally have engineering jobs, and moving opportunity out of a couple different hubs that right now everyone's trying to live in and can't afford to live in. So I think that's valuable, and I hope that NASA can keep some of that in as they go through this more efficient architecture.
Yeah, and like the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, I mean, you have like
Hmm.
these 14 companies that are really kind of small, delivering payloads to the surface of the moon. And
Mm.
you have like Astrobotic in Pittsburgh, which is
Yep.
not known for aerospace, but they have like this huge center that they just started, where they're going to be controlling those missions, and they have like the landers, and kind of really educating and planting seeds for other people to be kind of
Mm.
interested in it. So
Exactly. I think Clips is the greatest thing ever. I'm even honestly, I'm almost as excited about Clips as I am about Artemis.
yeah, I'm actually I kind of more excited about Clips because the variability between the players and the already the ability to kind of have smaller customers latch on to that whole program.
Hmm.
It's kind of and universities and private companies and individuals, kind of neat. What do you think it would take to keep Clips going and to make it even stronger as we kind of have go through this political change?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think Clips is doing okay right now. I think one of the things I I perhaps worry about in Clips is that right now we're kind of bootstrapping this market into existence, and it feels like the top three contenders, your Intuitive Machines and your Astrobotic, are getting pretty much all of the business because they have their stuff together. And once Astrobotic has one mission, then you can say, well, yeah, we're going to let you deliver a Viper rover, and then at that point, you might keep building it. And I think there's this interesting conflict in these cost plus contracts, or in these fixed price contracts, in between um, getting the best value for your money and also still being in the position a little bit of seeding the market, because I feel like there isn't enough market yet for some of these companies to win, to survive while never getting contracts. And so I've thought about sometimes if there are ways that Clips can give a kind of smaller early deliverable to some of these companies and say, hey, if this company maybe can't get a lander to the lunar surface yet, maybe what they can do is build a payload element on someone else's lander, and we'll pay you a fixed price for that and get some value out of that, and that can kind of get you to cut your chops on sending things to the moon, and then you can work your way up from there. So I am hopeful that we can find a kind of a compromise in between just getting the best value for money all of the time and giving some of these companies smaller steps they can kind of move towards to keep more of them alive. In terms of the political transition, I don't have that many tremendously smart things to say about it. I am, as far as I can tell, I trust Joe Biden's transition team to make decent decisions. They're all smart, educated people. And I think, the increased focus on climate science is lovely. And I think making the argument that Clips is a much cheaper way of doing a lot of our exploration than the big budget programs, I think is good in a nation and an administration is probably a little bit more worried about the terrifying ongoing pandemic disaster. Um, I think if I'm worried about anything at all, it is that every time we have a political transition, it is a chance for the old way of doing things in all capital letters to assert itself, and a chance for us to get back to the everything should launch on SLS and uh, kind of approach. And I think it would be easy for the Biden administration to go back to that just to repudiate the Trump administration rather than for any actual reason. And so I'm hoping that enough people who actually understand the circumstances will be focused on the situation enough to recognize that this is a better approach. I remember I spoke to Lori Garver once, and she commented that when she showed up on the Obama transition team, the NASA transition team came up with their policy, and they said, hey, we should cancel the space shuttle. And they went to Obama and they said, Mr. President, we should cancel the space shuttle. And he said, why? And she said, because it costs billions of dollars a year and has killed 14 Americans. And she said, Obama responded, good point. And she realized that he just never thought about it, because space is so far down his list of priorities. And he kind of assumed you're going to do the space shuttle because it's what he'd done before, but it's not that he was dumb or a bad policymaker. It just never come up in his brain, in his list. And so my only worry with the Biden administration is that space will be so far down the list of priorities that they end up coming to a decision that's silly out of just not paying any attention to it at all. But I think they'll make a good decision, I think, if they pay attention. I think these programs have been really successful.
It's just, every mode of transportation kills people,
Hmm.
from elevators to airlines to, tennis shoes and bicycles, and cars. I don't think you can tell me a single mode of transportation where everybody has survived every trip.
Hmm.
But with spaceflight, it seems like our acceptance of people dying is way lower. And why do you think it's so different?
I mean, I think it's entirely a visibility thing. I think when there's people who die in space, everybody in the world hears about it. When people die in bicycles, no one really does. And so I think humans are really bad at estimating. It's the same thing where, like, we are more scared of dying in a terrorist attack than we are dying of a heart attack, even though a terrorist attack is, broadly speaking, much less likely. I think it has a really different hold on the human imagination. And I think a lot of people, when I've talked to them, they kind of talk about the Challenger disaster the same way they talk about 9/11. Despite the fact it killed 7 people and not 3,000. And I think I had a strange conversation with some. I was teaching. I taught a class about space flight policy some years ago, and in the class discussion, we had a conversation about this, where we were like, in a way, this will probably go away a little bit as more humans live in space. Sometimes people die in space, and eventually we realized that people would get desensitized to this. Eventually, I think it's very notable that Virgin Galactic has killed 4 people, and most people do not know this when they hear about Virgin Galactic. And people keep working at Virgin Galactic, and Virgin Galactic is still a functional company that's supposedly going to fly tourists soon. And they have a bigger death toll than the Apollo program did. Um, and so I think there is a certain level of desensitization that will eventually occur, especially when there's a bunch of little small companies that people don't pay as much attention to doing stuff. Um, the discussion I had in class was interesting because they talked about, maybe in order to explore space more, we need to make people desensitized more. We need to and we start talking about like how you would do that. And then we realized all the tactics you would use to do that are the same tactics you use if you're a government starting a war and you want to desensitize people to the costs of war. And we were like, gosh, do we really want that for space exploration? Maybe not. And so I guess my answer is, I think in a way, I think it's good for space exploration for people to get desensitized to this, because we're going to need people to die occasionally, just as a natural consequence of people existing in a space, and not cancel the program over it. I think it will happen naturally, and especially it's going to be a lot faster when you have a bunch of commercial space-like companies launching people to space, and you have a bigger economy in space. But at the same time, some sentimental part of me feels like this world is losing something when we get there, because I think the same thing that made people dying in space different than people dying on the ground was part of space being kind of this liminal, um, different thing. This place where adventure happens, this place that's special somehow. And every step that we take towards having a permanent human presence in space is another step away from it being this kind of very special frontier. And so something about that feels sad, even though I know it's good. Something about the idea that space will become less special, and people dying in space will be as ordinary as people dying on bicycles, um, feels a little interestingly emotional, even though in the long run it's a good thing.
Do you have any plans to go to space yourself?
Me, I think I would go to space at some point in the future, if it was cheap enough that a lot of people could do it. I don't really expect myself to ever have $250,000 to drop on Bezos's rocket. And I think, more relevantly, I'm not, for me, I've never been a person who wanted to be an astronaut. Not once in my entire life. I don't want to have a pilot's license. I think this is very weird, because this is what, everyone in aerospace got there because they wanted to be an astronaut, but they had bad vision. That's never been me. I don't think I am, I don't think I'm driven by a deep existential need to see the planet Earth from space or go on an adventure to space. And so I think I would do it the way that I would go on vacation to something really awesome and exciting. But I think as long as that there is, other people who can do more interesting things than me up there, they should go. I'm already excited about space, so I think it's more valuable for the universe if people who are not me and have a chance to get excited about space use our space flight resources. Um, I would almost feel bad taking one of the limited seats on one of those ships, um, while there's still a bunch of other people who could use this as a chance to become inspired. Um, so I think, yeah, it's down. I would do it. I'm not against it, but I also just like Earth a lot, and I want to die here. And I would not want to be. I would not want to be the first group of people to go off to Mars. And really, I think, um, I think we should maybe roll back our plans for when we plan to send people to Mars. I think the idea of sending people to Mars in 2024 is silly. I think the idea of having a settlement pretty soon is silly. I think people who tried to do that would suffer and die. Um, but I also, I like Earth a lot, and I don't think I could leave for any long period of time. And so I think I might visit one day if it became cheap enough, but it's not my greatest life priority.
And so before COVID, between like December and the end of March, I was interviewing regular everyday people at coffee shops, at the malls, on the streets, and the vast majority of people have no clue that we're going back to the moon in
Mm.
2024. Does this surprise you?
Not at all. I've done some amount of space advocacy things. I did a space podcast for a while, and then someone else took it over. I'm in a space themed cover band called the Artemis Generation,
Oh,
and
wow.
the number, you can find us at artemisgenerationband.com. But the number one thing I found, we play concerts about, we have a song about the Artemis program, and nobody knew what the Artemis program was, and it became a running joke inside our band that, like, don't worry if you haven't heard of it, nobody has. So it's not surprising to me at all that the Artemis, like this Artemis thing, is not on anybody's radar. And I think a lot of people in the space industry do forget about this. I think it's really easy to live in the space bubble, and all we hear and read about is Artemis. But I don't, most people I know are stunned that humans are ever going back into space. I think when Crew Dragon Demo 2 launched, people were like, wait, I thought NASA stopped doing that.
Oh, exactly. I heard that too. Some people were like, didn't they shut everything down in 2011, with the retirement of the space shuttle? Of course, I also heard the other thing too is, aren't the astronauts already going to the moon? Like, where do they
Mm-hmm.
go? It must be the moon, It's like,
Mm-hmm.
but that's interesting. Do you think this space interest and what have you would be better served if more people knew about it?
I think so. I think space right now, if nothing else, I think, if you do all the surveys on like what people think space would be useful for, I think it's very fascinating that the majority of Americans do not want us to go back to the moon. The majority of Americans want asteroid defense and climate protection as like their top space priorities. And I think right now the space industry is this tiny little bubble of people who are excited about stuff. And in this little bubble on space Twitter, where we all read Eric Berger and NASAspaceflight.com and whatever, we're all psyched about the Artemis program. We're all excited about sending people back to the moon, and so on and so forth. And then, I imagine everyone will be excited about it in like the 6 months before and after the first woman and next man land on the moon. But I think in the long run, for the space industry to be both a vibrant industry, an industry that can do more stuff and have humans eventually live there and be able to justify itself to the world, space needs to mean something other than rockets. Space needs to provide people cures from the International Space Station, and have manufacturing there, and space needs to be a place where people live. And so we need space dentists, and we need space doctors, and we need space chemical engineers, and we need like space marketing people, and we need space, like the whole spectrum of human experience needs to go up there eventually. And I think right now space is very much, if you work on rocket science, space is your everything. If you don't work on rocket science, you assume space is near nothing. It's not relevant to you. And so I think in the long run, excuse me, I almost sneezed, didn't quite make it. I think in the long run, it's good if more people learn about space, because that will make space a healthier industry, because that will start to open up people's belief that space isn't just for rocket science people. Space is another place where the whole spectrum of human existence is. And then I think, that will start to attract people that the industry needs to focus a little bit less on building rockets. I say this as someone building rockets myself who does propulsion, but I think that will make us a healthier industry in the long run.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, by the way, I'm sending this recording on a micro SD card on the astrobotic flight. So at some point, somebody will find it on the moon, and I think in the future they'll have this amazing ability to sort of do forensic research and be able to reconstruct the bytes that are on there. So that's my theory for how it survives and gets read. But so assuming you have like a high schooler 100 years from now that's doing a report on what were people thinking before the new space age, what would you say to her?
I would say almost all of us did not see it coming at all. And a very small number of people saw exactly the wrong thing coming and were very excited about it.
Sounds good. I hope I get I would love to be around to see what that looks like in 100
Oh my
years.
gosh, yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to add or talk about that we didn't get to?
No, I think that covered it pretty well. I want to say, I think this is really amazing that you're doing this project, and I think it's an awesome thing. So I wanted to kind of, maybe thank you for your time and effort that you put into this.
I really appreciate that. And if you know anybody else that would be willing to have a conversation, even if, especially if they're not a space person, I'd be really interested in talking to any and everybody. So if you know of some
Will
people.
do. I'll spread it around.
Well, thanks. Well, you have a good rest of your day, Thomas. And I can't wait to fly Starship.
I hope so. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.